First things first, let's break down the tier list. We have the rework section. These are operators that are necessarily bad. I just don't think that their design as a character is good, so I want them to be reworked. Operators that are bad are operators that if you pick them, you're probably putting your team at a disadvantage for lack of utility. Operators that are okay are operators that are just okay. You could play them every single round, but you won't be providing the most value. Operators that are good are operators that you can pick every round and be fine, like Sledge, for example, right? And then operators that are broken are operators that need to get nerfed, like absolutely need to get nerfed. But the situational category I do want to talk about. Anybody in situational isn't better than people over here or worse than people over here. Think of it as like its own little tier list, right? With it out of the way, let's get straight into the tier list. So Ace, I think, is good. You could pick Ace every single round and be fine. I don't think he needs to be nerfed, so I don't think he's broken, but he's one of the best solo queue operators in the entire game, arguably the best on attack, right? Alibi, I think, is actually okay right now. The thing with Alibi is, like, when you looked at the win rates for this season, Alibi was actually super, super high up there. She has a good gun. She has a bailiff. She just lacks in a little bit of utility, but Alibi really is not that bad. Her gun is just so good, chat. Her gun is so good. We'll put her in good for now, and we'll move her down maybe, because she's nowhere near the same caliber as, like, an Ace, so I'll put her in okay. Amaru, I think, needs to be reworked in how her gadget work, because every time that you use her gadget, it's essentially taking a 50-50 dice roll on if you get a kill or if the enemy gets a kill. Taking a 50% chance in a game that's one-shot headshot is kind of shitty. It's kind of shitty. The gadget's loud, they can always hear it coming and always kill you. In higher lobbies, she never works, so she just needs to be reworked in some way to make her a little bit more viable. Let's talk about Aruni. I think Aruni's pretty good. I hated on Aruni a lot in the past because I don't think her actual gadget is that good, but she is a really versatile operator. You have a great DMR, you have the ability to make punch holes anywhere you go, you have ACOGs on said DMR, you have a lot of armor if you're anchoring, which you will be if you're playing this operator correctly, and the gates at most give you info on where they're pushing. So I mean, like, the operator gadget isn't that good in my opinion, at least compared to like Ace, but still a pretty good operator nonetheless because of the utility that they bring. Let's go to Ashe. I think Ashe is pretty good. Ashe doesn't need to be nerfed, but I think the ability to counter Mirror, to counter Maestro, to counter deployable shields, the ability to have an ACOG on some of the best weapons in the game, for sure. So Ubisoft talked about how they nerfed Azami and made her shootable, right? But even after they did that, there were more people that were knifing her barricades than shooting them. Because a lot of the times people don't want to take the risk of peeking in a zombie barricade. That's really far away because you're going to get swung, right? So they wanted to make bullet damage more viable for her, so they just nerfed her damage a little bit, but I don't think it's going to affect her, because most people melee her shit anyways. I haven't tested it enough to see, but I still think just the concept of Azami is broken. Yeah, I think Azami is still broken. You can just do so much as Azami. So much. It's ridiculous. Bandit is situational. You're not going to need a bandit every single round that you play, because you don't need to keep walls open on every single site. There are some sites that you don't need to keep a wall open. The same exact thing can be said for Cade as well. I think Turborao is extremely situational. If Cade is unbanned and they don't have a Thatcher, you run Cade Turborao and they can't get the wall open. Another operator that I think is just as situational is Castle. You can play Castle every site, but you're not going to get a bunch of value out of him every single site. An operator that I do not think is that good, though, right now is Nook. The reason for that being is because her not having the silent step makes her a little bit unplayable. Right? It just, if she had silent step, she'd be good. If she had a better primary AR, I think she'd be a little bit good. Her SMG, the FMG9, just sucks. I think anybody that's played the game for more than 100 hours know that SMG is just absolutely terrible. Too much recoil, not enough rate of fire, not enough damage. It's just not really fun to play, especially on PC with nerfed recoil. And no silent step makes her pretty useless in most scenarios. I don't think Blackbeard is bad. I think Blackbeard needs to be reworked, though. Which means just the concept of the gadget is the issue, right? So if they somehow reworked him, I think Blackbeard could be playable. I think Callie also deserves to be reworked. The thing about Callie is you need to be close on a wall to use her, right? And you need to be close to use her ability, and then once the wall's open, you need to be semi-close to the wall to be able to actually use the wall to kill people, right? So I think she needs to be reworked. And Glaz is the complete opposite. Glaz, you have to sit all the way in the back and use a Glaz sniper, right? and he has the less zoomed in scope. So I feel like for what they are and what their utility is, they need to switch weapons. Deadass. I think Glaz should have Callie's gun with the thermal scope, but not the ability, and I think Callie should have Glaz's gun with the ability. Let's talk about some better operators, though. I think Buck is great. You can play Buck every single round. He brings great utility, but I don't think Buck deserves to be nerfed, which is why I'm not putting him in broken. I also don't think that he's as good as Azami in some scenarios. But Buck is just a great operator. I think Ace is probably the best solo queue operator in the game, and Buck is a close second place, for sure, for sure. Gridlock. I think with the up damage, you have an ACOG, you have EMPs or smokes or frag grenades, you have a secondary shotgun as well, and you have the ability to flank watch, you have the ability to cut off rotations with your tracks to get a plant down in a plant heavy meta. I think Gridlock is absolutely great. Next up, let's talk about Blitz. I'm gonna put Blitz and Monty both in the broken category. I think shields are fundamentally broken right now. They have almost no counters, and a terrible siege player that just picks up a shield is actually more dangerous than a good shield player that isn't playing a shield. Clash is different because you don't have the ability to run on people with your shield. I think Clash is a little bit more balanced. Although she is annoying to go against, her win rate is the lowest in the entire game. So I want to say Clash is a situational operator because situationally you can be a good Clash player on situational sites. But she's not good on every site. Somebody else who I think is highly situational would be Capitao. You can play Capitao everywhere you go, but you're not gonna get value out of Capitao everywhere you go. Brava, I think, is situationally dependent. If they don't have any utility that you're going to hack, I would say the same thing goes for Flores as well. Console players are going to hit me for this, but I think Twitch is also situational. These three operators, utility-wise, are only good if you're going against utility that you need to use, right? But you might be saying, well, they have good weapons and smoke grenades or flash grenades. Sure, but so do a lot of other attackers that bring better utility in those certain scenarios, right? IQ is situational. You're really only going to use IQ if you're going against a Valkyrie or a Fenrir or an Echo. I don't know, man. Now that you can ping shit, I feel like maybe IQ isn't as situational as I think she is. She might honestly go down a tier. We'll see. I think IQ is pretty situational, though, because you only really play her if you're trying to counter utility, right? You don't really, like, select IQ. Somebody that people love to select out of nowhere there would be Cav. Hot take, I don't think Cav needs to be reworked, but I do think Cav is bad. The silent step is great, but it's not silent enough because I can still hear Cav players, and I think if she had a better primary SMG than the one that she has, she'd be great. Because she has the impacts, she has the silent step, and then she has a good SMG. I feel like Cav would be, like, crazy good, especially in lower ranks. I feel like Cav would be crazy. Somebody else who I don't think is very good is Sens. I think Sens is a pretty bad operator. I don't think Sens needs to be reworked. I think you can buff Sens' gadget in a way that's not technically a rework, but is still just a buff. The issue with Sens is there are too many things that counter Sens, right? And the wall is unreliable because you don't know where the fuck it's going to go half the time, right? So if they made it to where it would show you where it's going to get deployed, I think that'd be great. And if they made it to where it couldn't be countered by explosives, I think that would also make Sens much more viable. I think Ella is good, and I'll tell you why I think Ella is good. Ella, right now, is one of the best shield counters in the entire game, because you have Ella mines, which take shields out of their face, and then you can just shoot them, right? And then she also has high fire rate weapons, which means that you can activate suppression on the shields very, very easily so they can't sprint at you. And then you also have impact grenades on Ella now to further counter those shields. So if you're tired of shields, Ella is really good, and shields, like I said, are super meta, super broken right now. So Ella is just outstanding, I think. One of the best operators right now. Somebody who I also think is just as good would be Dokkaebi. I think Dokkaebi is still broken. They need to nerf Dokkaebi somehow. Whether it be making it to where defenders can still be on cams even if their phone is ringing, or making it to where dead people can still see on cams if phones are ringing, or taking away her EMP grenades, or her flash grenades, or her smoke grenades, or something. Just taking away a few things, because she's way too versatile. That's the issue. I don't know that Fenrir is broken anymore. I think Fenrir is good, but I don't think Fenrir is fundamentally broken, purely for the fact that you can only have 2 of his mines active at a time, and they're not bulletproof, so Twitch, especially on console when people play Twitch a lot, is a great counter to Fenrir. So I don't know that Fenrir is broken, but I still do think Fenrir is a great operator. I don't think he was nerfed as much people think he is. But somebody who definitely is as nerfed as people think they are is Solis. Solis right now, because you can't use her in the prep phase, isn't broken. And because the range that she can see things being nerfed also makes her worse. And I think the fact that she doesn't have impacts also makes her worse. You can say that her ability fundamentally is broken, but I think if you want to know where people are pushing from and what gadgets they're using, you could just play Valkyrie. So I think Solus right now is just okay. I don't think Solus is that good anymore. Honestly, I think they over-nerfed her. They need to give her back her range, I think. Or give her back her impacts, and I think she would be in the good category for sure. But having both of those things being nerfed, I think is a bit too far. Somebody else who was nerfed recently is Y9S2. I think Y9S2 right now is not as good as Jaeger because people are using smokes and people are using Ying so much that the Y9S2 disc not destroying the gadget and still deploying it even though it caught it is kind of bad, and I think Jaeger would be preferred. He also just lost his ACOG, so right now I think Y9S2 is just okay. Which is a bit weird to see Solus and Y9S2 this low on a tier list, isn't it? The mirror placement right now, I think, is going to be situational. There are some sites where you can't play mirror. I say this every tier list, and I use the exact same example every tier list. Hookah on Coastline. There is not a single wall on that site that you can put a mirror that is safe. You can shoot every single mirror placement on that site from outside the building, and the one wall that you can't, which is the right side on Vase, you can easily get somebody on Cool Vibes or easily get somebody to ash it from a window or throw a Twitch drone down the vent on top of Cool Vibes. She's just too counterable on that site, on a lot of other sites too. So mirror is just too counterable. Someone that is much less site dependent is Frost. I think now that Y9S2 has lost his ACOG, those flex players are going to be looking for a new main once people realize that Echo isn't really that good, and they're going to start playing Frost. You have an ability that's okay. At best, it's good for information when they shoot your Frost mats. You have a secondary shotgun for site setup, so she is pretty okay, but I don't think in good faith that I can put her above Y9S2, above Solus, or above Alibi, but I don't think she's as bad as these operators here, so I'm going to stick her in okay for now. Somebody else I'm going to stick in okay is Fuse. I don't think Fuse is that good. I think it's pretty overrated. The guns on Fuse are great. The ability, when used properly, can be okay, but that's it. That's literally it. I think the best part about playing Fuse is having an AK and smoke grenades. That shit's crazy. But the ability I don't think is as good because anybody in high elo is going to shoot your Fuse charge as you place it down. So you'll get at most one grenade off per Fuse charge. Next, I want to talk about the hard breachers. The hard breachers are all situational. You're not going to want to bring a Habana every site. You're only going to really use her if you have hatches. You're not going to want to bring a thermite if they are, let's say, bandit tricking. You're not going to want to bring an ace. If I could find ace, where is ace? Did I already place him? Oh, yeah. You're not going to want to play an ace if they have a Cade, but I mean, you can still push backside and you still have an AK, so I feel like ace is a little bit of an exception. Maverick, you're hardly going to play ever unless you're solo pushing. So I think Maverick is also pretty situational. I might argue to put him lower later in the tier list, and I'll explain why. And the same thing goes for the anti-breach ops as well. They're all situational because you're only going to use them on certain sites, on certain walls, pushing certain objectives. You're not going to use a Maverick every single round. You're not going to use a Thermite every single round. You're not going to use a Bandit or a Cade or a Tuberao. It's very, very site dependent, and it's dependent on what their site setup is or what attackers you think that they have on the board. Like if Thatcher's banned or Thatcher's unbanned, right? It's all very, very situational. Chat, I'm losing my voice. I'm not going to lie. God damn, I'm a yapper. I yap so much. An operator that I think is much better though would be Maestro. I think Maestro is good. The ability to have 3 Evil Eyes, a really good LMG, a Bailiff for site setup. You have impact grenades as well for the shields. Maestro is pretty comfortable to play right now. And now that Echo has the ACOG, I can say that Echo is honestly the same. The ability to have an ACOG and the ability to have more armor is pretty nice. You can also have impacts if you want, or a deployable shield that you can sit behind as well. Some sites don't really require a deployable shield, like the top floor of layer, I guess. So having impacts for the shields is very, very nice. The weapon isn't too hard to control. The ability's pretty good, especially, like I said, for the plant meta and shield meta that we're currently in. So this is honestly the best that Echo and Maestro have been in a long, long time. Rook, I think, is good. The utility is not that good unless you're on console and you can get away with self-revives. But you have impacts for the shields, you have a good weapon, and chat, for Platinum and above, Rook is the most won with operator on defense for PC. And he is the 3rd most won with defensive operator on console for Platinum and above players. So if he's had that high of a win rate, not only this season, but for the past few seasons, he's got to be good, right? Even if most people don't think he is, I think he's good enough and very comfortable to play that he's a great fragger for defense. Somebody else who's a bit more aggressive that you can frag with that I think is still pretty good is Doc, and I think Doc is also pretty good right now. You have the Bailiff, The healing output that Doc has is very nice. You can overheal yourself for gunfights as well. Paired up with a rook, you get a lot of health. You have barbed wire, which does damage right now, which is really good if you put it under windows, if you know they're running shield, so a shield counter right there. I mean, the ACOG and the low recoil SMG, what more can you say, right? Very comfortable to play, especially on console when ACOGs are like gold over there. People love ACOGs because you can't have stretched res, so 1x scopes are really hard to play with. So like extremely valuable operators on console and still pretty good on PC as well. Someone a bit more situational though is Deimos. There are some sites where you really cannot play Deimos. I think the top floor of Oregon is a great example. If you want to dodge a Deimos, all you have to do is go into attic because he can't shoot below or above you or through the reinforcements around you, making him completely useless, right? The same can honestly said for the basement of Oregon as well. There's no vert for the basement of Oregon, so Deimos just sucks on Oregon for the second floor and basement sites, right? So that's why I think it's pretty situational. It's pretty map dependent on the soft floors, the walls that are around you, the layout, things of that nature. I think Jackal's pretty good. Like, his utility is great. I think if people put him in, like, okay, I think they're honestly just trying to hate on Jackal too much because it's, like, the cool thing to do for good players right now. But you have smoke grenades, you have an ACOG and a great AR, or the PDW, you have an ability to roam clear, you have a secondary shotgun for vert or for making yourself rotate, and that's just really, really good. I don't think Jackal needs to get nerfed. I don't think he's nearly as powerful as Dokkaebi is, in my opinion. But Jackal definitely is good. Melusi, right now, I don't want to put her in okay, but if there was a tier between good and okay, that's where I'd put her. Now, console players started freaking out when Melusi got a 4th Banshee because traps are really valuable over there due to the fact that they can't really shoot them as well because they're on a controller, right? I get it. That's why Capcan is the #1 most won-with defender on console, and he's nowhere near that on PC. That being said, that's really good for console players, but I also don't like the fact that she doesn't have an ACOG now, because on PC, people are always going to opt out to play Fenrir over Melusi. They both have 4 traps, they both have a shotgun for sight setup, and they both have an SMG with only 1x scopes on them, excuse me. So why would you ever pick Melusi over Fenrir if Fenrir brings the same exact shit as Melusi, but he also blinds people? They have the exact same thing. So I think Fenrir outshines Melusi in every way except for the impact grenades. But if you're on console, she can be very, very good. And it's good for countering shields too. So I still think Melusi's pretty strong right now, honestly. Someone who I think is a bit more strong right now than people realize is Jaeger. I don't think Jaeger is as bad as Wamai, now that Wamai doesn't have the 1.5 time scope. But I don't know that I can honestly put him in good either. Like, yeah, Jaeger is great, but if you know they have a Jaeger, you just bring 1 set of flash grenades and you're fine. Like, you're really fine. People love to play Twitch as well. People love to play Brava. People typically are bringing, like, at least 3 sets of smoke grenades, so you can burn ADSs pretty easily, or at least bypass them. His gun also got nerfed into Oblivion. I will say he does have barbed wire, though. Or no, doesn't he only have a bulletproof shield and observation blockers? Or not? Yeah, not a bulletproof shield, a bulletproof camera. I don't think Sledge is good right now. The ACOG on the low recoil AR is nice. The utility is still pretty nice, but the fact that you're a 3 armor and you can't cook frag grenades takes a lot of why Sledge was good away. Because if you're a 3 armor trying to make vert, it's so much easier for them to nitro you because you're so slow. You know what I mean? Someone who I think is a lot better, though, is Valkyrie. I have been saying this for the past 2 years. The only reason people do not think Valkyrie is broken is because Fenrir, Solus, and Azami, and Turborau, and Cade were all at their peak as operators at the same time, and they were all just better than Valkyrie. But now that Fenrir's been nerfed, Solus has been nerfed to the ground, people are not really playing Cade and Turborau as much in ranked lobbies, and Azami has also been nerfed to a fair amount. I think Valkyrie is going to be played a lot more now, and people used to put Valkyrie in their tier list all the time, and they always put them S tier before these operators came out, and they haven't changed Valkyrie other than the fact that you don't have outside cameras. So I still think Valkyrie's broken. Like, she hasn't changed. The Nitro Cell for the shield operators or for a free kill, you can even bring impacts, you have a good SMG that you can hit heads with very easily, 3 great cameras. I think Valkyrie's broken, dude. Valkyrie is just insane. She's crazy. She's insane. Next up, let's go over a different operator, which is Sentry. Sentry, in my opinion, to be completely honest, is bad. The only real thing that I can see Sentry being used for is bringing proximity alarms and barbed wire on the same operator, which is kind of cool. But if you wanted that much information, you could just bring Fenrir or Legion, so not really. Or bringing impact grenades and a nitro cell for shield operators. but you could also just bring impacts and a different operator that's good for countering shields. So I just feel like Sentry is kind of dog ass, I'm not gonna lie. However, I think where's Striker? I think Striker is actually pretty good though. I think Striker's good. The fact that you can bring EMPs and a hard breaching device and an ACOG on an M4 and a secondary shotgun, or you can bring smokes and flashes for a plant. I'm not gonna lie, bro, Striker's pretty good in the right hands and in the right team composition for solo queue players. Goyo, I think, is pretty good. Let me zoom out so you can see that the operator's better. Goyo, I think, is pretty good. ACOG on a Vector. Also, he has impact grenades, right, for shields. That's crazy. And then he also has Goyo Fire, which is so good if you know how to play around it correctly. Goyo definitely is very, very, very healthy right now. Let's go over Smoke. Smoke, for me, is pretty difficult to rank, because every attacker has ACOGs now. People just run by your smokes half the time. But I will say, barbed wire doing damage and being able to slow people down in your smokes, and if you're good with the SMG-11, I think Smoke is good. The issue with Smoke is you have to be good with Smoke for Smoke to be good. He has a very high skill floor, right? Ram. Let's take a look at Ram. If there was a tier in between situational and good, I'd put her there. But, because, like, she is good. You could play her every round. She has really good guns. The issue is, in terms of utility, you're not going to use her every round. Like, I think Buck is going to be better than Ram, unless you're using Ram for Vert most of the time. I think Ram is good. I think Ram's fine. Someone who does need to rework, though, is Tachanka. Now, I will say, I don't think Tachanka is actually as bad as these operators. I think Tachanka gets a lot of unnecessary hate. Tachanka also is a great counter to shields because your fire activates suppression, which means they can't sprint. And you are able to delay so much time and damage them by so much that Tachanka is a great shield counter. But it needs to be an underbarrel gadget. It needs to be. It absolutely has to be. Make it an underbarrel gadget and give him the ability to have that turret. And he's, dude, crazy good operator. Crazy good operator, dude. Insane operator. Let's move on to Mute, though. A lot of people say Mute is broken because he's so versatile. I don't think Mute's broken. I don't think, like I said, people who are broken are people who need nerfs. I don't think Mute needs a nerf. Valkyrie might not need a nerf either, to be fair, though, if we really want to make that the definition. Yeah, let's move Valkyrie and Mute down a tier, because Valkyrie doesn't need to be nerfed now that I think about it. I don't think Mute needs to be nerfed either. I think they're both balanced operators that are very, very good. If there was, like, maybe a tier list in between broken and good, I'd put them both there, because that's a pretty hard decision to make. But, yeah, I don't think Mute's broken. I don't think Valkyrie's broken either. I think they really just need to focus on nerfing these operators. Let's talk about an operator that I have a bit of a theory on, and I think it's Finka. Now, Finka did have the highest win rate out of any attacker for this season, but I think that is probably due to cheaters, because cheaters use Finka LMG and skew the stats. But I do think having an LMG and adrenal surges and flash grenades is really good if you want to be a good entry fragger. So Finka can be pretty good, especially in ranked. Somebody else who I think is pretty good, especially in ranked, would be Grim. Grim is hard for me to place because, to be honest, I think Grim is pretty situational in how you play him. Like, Grim in solo queue kind of sucks because you could just drone people. You don't really need Grim. But if you're going for a fast execute, Grim is great because you need the information while you're doing things, and you can't have people on drones. For example, if you have like a Monty and a Ying going for a smoke plant, right? Those people can't be on drones, and their teammates can't be on drones because their teammates have to cover them, but you still need the information regardless, and Grim is great at doing that, right? Especially because they won't be able to see the Grim bees because they're in smokes. It makes them more powerful and more consistent, right? But if you're doing like a roam clear, it makes more sense to play Jackal and Dokkaebi because they can get information at a much easier rate, and it's not as risky, right? You don't have to pull out a launcher to do it. So I think it's situational on the type of take that you're doing and how aggressive your team is being, if that makes sense. Somebody else who I don't think is really situational, but isn't really that good, would be Yana. The fact that she brings EMPs means that you can't entry frag on her, which means that her clone is not as useful. So I think Yana is just okay, especially when compared to Ashe, who can now counter Mira, or Buck, who has flashes, or Finka, who has flashes, right? Or Dokkaebi, or Monty, or Blitz. Like, there's just no use for a Yana anymore. You can also just use drones. Or Dokkaebi, right? Capcan, I will say, is pretty good. Especially if you're in lower ranks. Capcan can be absolutely fire. I love Capcan. Very, very fun operator. Even in higher elo, dude, I get Capcan trap kills all the time if you know how to play him. You have a Nitro for the shields, too. I mean, Capcan is just great. Good Monty counter as well. Same thing can be said for Legion. I don't think Legion is broken. I don't think Legion needs to be nerfed. I think Legion is a good amount of nerfed. But the ability to have that much information, the ability to counter shields, secondary shotgun, T5 SMG, I feel like Legion is crazy, crazy good. Crazy, crazy good. Mozzie right now, I think, is okay. The only thing saving Mozzie from being a bad operator, I think, is his nitro cell. But they need to give him an ACOG. I think, nah, because the people would get too aggressive. I don't know what they would need to do to Mozzie. I think maybe they need to give Mozzie a 4th pest, maybe even a 5th pest, in order for him to be at all viable. Or give him a 4th pest, but a secondary shotgun. That actually might make him better, but I don't think he's very good right now. Not having the ACOG and the P10 Roni sucks, dude. Absolutely sucks. Just not fun to have gunfights with anymore. Pulse is situational. You can't play him on every map because you have to be on a site that is not on the 2nd floor. And even roaming with him below a 2nd floor site kind of sucks. Let's go over Oryx. I think Oryx is pretty bad. You have no sort of good scopes whatsoever. The ability is never worth using through walls. It's a good shield counter, but a lot of the times if the shield player is even semi-decent, you are going to miss your Oryx dash. Unless you're in a confined space like rafters on Clubhouse, right? That's the only time Oryx is really viable. But if you're that situationally dependent, not very good. The same thing can be said for Thunderbird. There are certain scenarios where Thunderbird can be okay, but that's like in 1 or 2 cases in the entire game. Other than that, Thunderbird fucking sucks. The worst healing operator in the entire game. The weapons are not good. The secondary gadgets are not good. So Thunderbird is just bad in my opinion. Finally, going over the last bad operator that I'm going to talk about, and that is Thorn. I don't think Thorn is as bad as these operators down here. I think Thorn is like up here in terms of how good Thorn is. Because the ability is pretty good, especially with the barbed wire rework, especially when people are planting a lot. The ability to have the 50 cal SMG to make head holes and stuff is nice as well. A deployable shield is also always going to be nice, or barbed wire again. So there is a place for Thorn. I just don't think Thorn is very good compared to these operators up here. I don't know. Lion. I think Lion is pretty good. Not gonna lie. The versatility Lion brings, the low skill floor but high skill ceiling on the gadget, the great weapons. I mean, the DMR on Lion is insane. Or if you're on console, the AR is great. He has the best shotgun in the game, right? So Lion is just always going to be kind of good. Very good low skill pick. Somebody else who I think is pretty good right now would be Vigil. I think people are starting to realize how good the Boss G is. His SMG also is nice. People are starting to drone a little bit more, especially because they're going for plants. The impact grenades to counter shield is also pretty nice. You can counter Grim, you can counter Lion, you can counter Deimos. So Vigil's pretty good. I do think Vigil's pretty good. Somebody else who I think is very good is Osa. Osa's very nice. You can bring her to every single side on every single map and get so much usefulness out of Osa. Also, being able to bait out impact grenades so they don't have them for your shield players is very nice. Good weapons as well, EMP grenades as well. And the gadget is just like super, super good. So Osa, I think, is outstanding. Thatcher, I think, is pretty situational. There's some walls where it's better to have a Thatcher, and some walls where it's better to have EMP grenades. So that's one reason it's situational. Another reason that is situational is because if they are bandit tricking, you're almost shit out of luck, and you might as well just bring the EMP grenades. He's pretty easy to bandit trick around. I will not lie. He's very, very easy to bandit trick around. So just because of EMP grenades, and a lot of the times people aren't even bringing Wall Denial, they're just bringing Mute, I think Thatcher is just situational. Warden, I also think, is situational. The thing with Warden is you really only want to play Warden on sites where you know that smoke plants are common. For example, if you go Archives and Armory on Border, people like to do an east take and plant in Archives, and they love to use smoke grenades, Monties, Yings. So if you play a Warden on that site by default, it's actually a good idea because of how common it is for people to do shield smoke plants. The same thing can be said for the basement of Lair. People love to smoke plant there because you have mirrors, you have a box that's good, you have vert. So like you can pre-fire Warden and play him unironically, but it's pretty situational that you would do that. Ying, however, I think Ying is broken, low-key. I think the fact that she has 4 Candelas is a bit too much, or they need to take away her smoke grenades. Because she's just so cohesive. She has an 80 round drum mag LMG with an ACOG as well. That kind of fucking sucks to go against. So I think if they took a Candela away, Ying would be a bit more balanced. Let's take another look. I think Nomad you could put in good purely for the fact that she's pretty good for runouts. She's arguably the best for runouts. Not really good for flanks, I would say, but for runouts she's pretty good. You can use her on site as well. But the fact of the matter is that everybody is bringing impact grenades because of the shield meta, which makes her not very good. So she's really only good for runouts. because you can put them above the window or above the door and they can't impact grenade that. She also has flash grenades and 2 good guns, so I think Nomad is pretty good. Next up, let's go over Zero. I think, oh man, the console players are going to hate me for this one, and so are the gold players on PC, but I think Zero's okay. The only reason that Zero is good is because of his versatility, right? People are like, oh, he brings hard-reaching charges and a good gun and good cameras. I mean, but so do other operators, right? His gun's good, I will say, but so is like Ash's gun, right? And she's pretty versatile too. I would say Gridlock is more versatile than Zero and still pretty good to play. Buck is great for solo queue. Ace is good for solo queue. The issue with Zero is that the best way to play Zero is to use his cameras for flank watch. And if you're solo queuing, none of your teammates are going to fucking watch your cams. If you're alive, you're not going to watch your cams either, which means that you're banking on you dying, and that's never really good. So I think Zero is pretty overrated, especially for people who are very new to the game and haven't played on like a competitive level in terms of like champion elo or like actually competitive. I don't think Zero is as good as somebody like fucking Fenrir or Ace or Goyo or Ash or Melusi, right? He just doesn't belong with those operators. The same exact thing can also be said for Zofia. I think Zofia, the fact that she's a 3 armor really kills her, and the recoil on her weapons really sucks for new players, so she's just not seen as good. I think if they made her a 2-speed and they reduced her recoil, even then people wouldn't opt to play her over people like Ash or Ace. So it wouldn't be that big of a deal if they buffed her, if that makes sense. But with that out of the way, that is the entire tier list. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with anything I have and why. And my name is Alka, and I'll see you all in the next video. Later.